To demonstrate shared variables and shared properties, I created an application for a 3-on-3 basketball game to keep track of the scores for both teams and the points scored by each player. There's a little setup button here, and we can put in players' names. So I'll enter Alice, Amy, Angelina, and then for team B, Barbara, Billy Joe, and Brenda. As the game progresses, I can click on the radio button in front of any name and choose whether they've scored 1, 2, or 3 points. So we'll say Amy starts with 2, and then I misspelled Brenda, but that's okay. Brenda gets a 3-pointer, and then Angelina hits another 2, but is fouled and gets a 1. So as I'm keeping track of the score for each player, it's also showing me the total for each team. Now I'm not calculating the sum of the players to get that. What I have is a static variable and a static property of each class for the players of Team A and the players of Team B. In other languages such as C# or Java, these might be referred to as static variables or static properties. In the project, I created 2 data classes, one for player A and one for player B. And those will keep track of the players for each of the teams A and B. In the player A, I created some classable variables. In the classable variables, notice the third one has a keyword of shared in front of it. It's team PTS as integer equals 0. And then there's a public property that front ends that as shared property team points. What the shared keyword does is it shares that value amongst all the members or instances of that class. So the way this will work is whenever we increase the points for a player, the team points will increase for all of the players. Now I did a little bit differently for the team B, and that was using the auto-implemented properties. Same idea. Here we have public shared property team points as string equals 0. So again, that value for team points is shared amongst all the instances of player B. Let's look a little closer at the code of the project. The player A class has 3 variables as classable variables for the player name, the points that player has scored, and the team points, which is the shared variable. It's initially set to 0. Then we have our public properties for the player name, the points, and the team points. And again, the team points is a shared property. My constructor is I'm simply passing it the player name as variable P and setting the points for that player to 0. And in the class methods, we have a score. I'm going to pass it an integer for the number of points. It would be 1, 2, or 3. We're going to increment our points classable variable by that value of P and increment the team points also by that same value. Player B is in essence the exact same thing, except I used auto-implemented properties rather than classable variables and the front-ended properties. So each of these are public properties, player name, points, and team points, but the team points is shared. And again, it's set to 0. The constructor is the same, and the method for incrementing the score of each player and the team score is also the same. Well, actually, there is a difference both in the constructor and the class method, and that is I'm referencing the property and not the class level variables. So player name and points and team points. The form, I have 6 radio buttons, 3 on each side for the 3 different players, as well as some labels for the points for each of those players. These are named RB player A1, RB player A2, RB player A3, RB player B1, RB player B2, RB player B3. And my labels correspond to that. Our LBL score A1, LBL score A2, LBL score A3, LBL score B1, LBL score B2, and LBL score B3. I also have my 2 labels here for the team scores, LBL score A and LBL score B, and then the 3 buttons down here, which is BTN score 1, BTN score 2, and BTN score 3, and then my setup button, BTN setup. The code, I'm setting two lists, one called Team A of player A and one called Team B of player B, and my current player as a string is going to equal A1. That current player is going to keep track of which radio button is clicked so that I add the points to the correct player when I click those 3 point buttons at the bottom. My setup is I'm going to clear Team A and B, and then I'm going to dim my name as string and then go through a loop 1 to 3 and ask the player to enter the names of those 3 different players on side A and add those players as instances to the Team A list, instances of player A, and then also setting the names of those 3 radio buttons, which I put into a little array so I can access them by their index. And in front of those, I'm also going to put A1, A2, and A3 in front of the name, which will make it really easy then to get the clicked radio button by accessing those first 2 letters, A1 versus B3. I do the same thing down here for the B team. So I've got an array of radio buttons for players B, RB players, player B1, B2, B3, and then again asking for the name, adding an instance of player B to Team B, and setting the text property of those 3 players. I set the LBL score A.text, that's going to be the team score, to Team A element 2.team points. I could use any one of the elements, 0, 1, or 2. They're all going to be 0. And then same with LBL score B. And then I set the current player to A1, just to make sure that that is set. I'm going to scroll down here a little bit first to the choose player, which handles all those different radio buttons with the check change. And all I'm doing there is current player equals sender.text substring 0, 2. That's going to be my first 2 characters of the text of each of those radio buttons, which will be A1, A2, A3, B1, B2, or B3. And then for the add score, that's going to handle all 3 of those buttons for +1, +2, and +3. I'm going to, first of all, get the integer value of the number in that text. So I'm going to take character 1, skipping character 0, it's either going to be 1, 2, or 3. That goes into P. And then my team is going to be current player.substring 0, 1. That's going to be A or B. And the number is going to be that same current player.substring, but here I'm taking character 1 and taking 1 character, -1, because I want to go from 0 to 2 rather than 1 to 3, and that becomes the player number. So with the team and the player number, we can then get the correct player to add the points to. So if team is A, then I'm going to dim points A as a label array, LBL score A1, LBL score A2, LBL score A3, team A, player num.score P. So I'm going to increment the player number. Again, that's going to be from 0 to 2, even though they're labeled 1 through 3. I'm going to increment the score by P. That's part of that method that was in our classes. And then I'm going to get points A of player num.text. So I'm going to get one of these 3 labels, set the text to it, to team A player num.points.toString. And then I'm also going to set the team points for that player, which will set the team points for the score for the team of LBL score A. Same thing with team B. The only difference is I'm accessing the 3 different labels for the scores for score B and using the team B list to increment the score and to get the points in the team points. So the advantage here is I'm not having to do any summing or calculating of those points. They're all being calculated here in the class method. Whenever I increment the points, it's incrementing that shared team points. And that's simply what I'm getting, regardless of the player, to show the team score. If you just jumped into this video, you can see all the videos from the Programming Practicum playlist by clicking on the image in the lower right. And if you'd like to be alerted to future videos I create, you can click my picture in the top right to subscribe to the channel.